All right, here we go. We're ready.
Hello, good morning, good day, Janet. How are you?
I'm good. Doing really good.
Great.
It's very chilly in Michigan
Is it really?
today. Yeah, like we're at like full-blown sweater weather here. It's under 70 today,
Oh
so
my goodness.
the seasons are changing whether we like it or not.
Right. Well, I know. And of course, I was talking with a good friend of mine in California yesterday, and she said the sky is orange, right?
Yeah,
And she lives right outside
unbelievable.
of San Francisco. I know. I said, we're praying for you. I'm so sorry. We love
Yes.
California. Okay, I see some folks are joining us. Welcome. Hello, everybody. As always, thank you, Jay. Tell us your name and where you are dialing in from today. We love to hear from folks. So it's a nice, cool temperature, 63 in Normal, Illinois.
Yeah.
How about that?
Getting about what we're getting in Michigan. Welcome, Jay.
Welcome, Jay. Yeah, Nashville here. It is it's well, I don't know, I think it's in the upper 80s today, but it's bright sunny sky today. So hi, Catherine. Hi, Jayma. Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining us, please type your name and tell us where you're dialing in from today. We love to see all of our many, many friends. Oh gosh, lots of great folks piling in today from Kentucky, from Little Rock, from Vermont. Wow, yes. Phoenix, Dubai.
I love it. Hello, Loretta.
Awesome. From London. We love to have our friends from Europe. We miss being with you all in Europe. That's for
we
sure.
do.
Oh, so good to see so many friendly faces.
Scottsdale, another one of my favorite.
Yes, of course. Chicago. Hi, Wendy. Great.
Hi, Roy.
From Singapore. Love it. Love it. Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to be with you. Janet, it feels like we've been a while since we've been with our tribe. So it's great to see you all, and hope everybody has had a good summer. I don't know about you, but we're sort of projecting that it's going to be a sprint to get to the end of the year. So everybody buckle up for what may be a pretty busy couple of months left in 2020. So. Okay, well, why don't we get started? I know it's at the top of the hour. We promised you guys to do a speed lead, so we're going to try not to go too terribly fast, but we are definitely going to move you through our content. So welcome. We are all about strategic planning. Janet and I talked about this the other day. We were like, we have got to do something on strategic planning because every client we have between the two of us is working on planning right now. It is the time of year to be thinking about it. And again, 2021, wow, that's right around the corner. It's a very different time to plan. We are planning to give you today all of the good nuggets that we can come up with that might be useful in this particular year, because this is unlike any other time to plan. So as always, it's Janet and myself. We are always delighted to be able to collaborate to bring you some really good and fresh content, and hopefully it helps you in the leadership that you are exhibiting wherever you are. So we have a question. We always like to engage you right away because our community is so smart. So let's share with each other. Type in the chat box for us and answer this question. What are you most worried about when it comes to planning for 2021? And again, we all know this is not the typical planning cycle. Things are really uncertain. What are you most worried about when it comes to planning for 2021? Janet's going to keep an eye on the chat box. We'll check back here in a second to see what comments that you are sharing with the community. As you're doing that, let me just tell you our goals for today is we want to inspire you, we want to motivate you, and we want to jumpstart your thinking a little bit, because you all are experts at planning. I know you are. You do it all the time, but we just all know it's so different right now. How do we jumpstart our thinking into this very unusual time to have a really workable plan that will help us to navigate whatever it is that comes in this next normal? Why don't we plan? We thought we'd start with this. Why do we resist planning? There are a lot of us that sort of say, well, I don't have the time, or where am I going to get my data? The data keeps changing now. Like what do you go with as reliable information? It takes a lot of energy and it takes resources. We know that it has to be a priority to get it done. Sometimes people say they don't like to plan because they feel like it's going to box them in. Like, oh, if I have this plan, it doesn't allow me to be agile enough, which is not true at all. And we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, COVID, which becomes the excuse for everything. You can't let that be the excuse. We can't let COVID win. We always have to have the discipline to be a good planner. So, Janet, why don't we stop just before we jump into our advice and see what did we hear in the chat box from people about what they're worried about?
Well, so besides the list that we've already started here, Mary Beth has a really good point about, is it just going to be a repeat of 2020? COVID-19 continued. This inability to predict the future and the economy. And also we have an election year, as someone points out. So the uncertainty Brittany mentions is kind of overwhelming at times, like to get to the planning process. So lots of things on the future, and also maybe the stability of the data and budget.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Is a significant barrier.
Yeah. And pointing out that it's not the normal planning cycle. We have a lot of unique challenges. So as we promised you, we're going to share with you 3 planning mistakes. And then we have a number of guiding principles that we want to share with you. By the way, we have a download that is a strategic planning guide that we're going to tell you about at the end. So be sure to stay on with us until the end of our time together. We'll tell you more about how you can get that. So 3 planning mistakes. I'm going to take the first one, and then I'm going to hand it over to Janet. Mistake number 1. Too focused on today versus too focused on tomorrow. So this is what I call the contrast between the today thinker and the tomorrow thinker. So you might be one or the other depending on the time, but let's talk about what these extremes are and why we want to avoid being just one or the other. So the today thinker, all they do is think about the urgent, but they're never thinking about the important. They have this kind of tendency to run to the loudest voice, wherever it might be. And what's the problem with that? Well, it doesn't allow you a chance to really develop a strategy or a vision for where you're wanting to go in the future. You come across to other people and probably to yourself as, I'm too scattered, I'm too disjointed, I don't seem to have any focus, and you waste a lot of mental and physical energy kind of running around. It's like a stop, start all the time. But your goal here should be to know how to pay enough attention to what is going on right now that it can inform your thinking for the future. So that would be your goal. It's not that you don't want to focus on today, but how much of today do you focus on? Why does this matter for 2021 planning specifically? Well, things are changing too rapidly. You are going to run yourself and your team completely ragged if all you do is run around to address the loudest voice or the biggest fire that seems to be going off. You need to know and learn how to address certain things when they need your attention. Very often, you need to just pause and say, if I even just wait till tomorrow, if I could wait till tomorrow, would I have more information? Would I be more thoughtful about the decision that I need to make? Would I have a clearer idea of what to do? Will the situation maybe even resolve itself where I'm not really needed to weigh in? So you can kind of pull back a little bit from so much of the stopping and starting if you just ask yourself a couple of simple questions like that. And the key here is that you have to hone a bit of future thinking skills. And for those of you who know that I'm big on future thinking, this idea of how can you get good at reading the weak signals that are kind of appearing on the horizon that would be an indicator of strong change. That will kind of force you to begin looking out over the horizon. So what's the flip side of that? Well, the flip side is the person that is the tomorrow thinker. And I think of that as the person that has their head in the clouds. You know, let's be honest, sometimes it's really fun to think about the future. And the problem there is that I'm not addressing what I need to today. Maybe I'm even avoiding dealing with some things that I probably need to deal with. Sometimes, and I've had a few clients that said, gosh, I just don't feel so confident in my decision-making abilities anymore. So your goal here is that you want to spend quality and thoughtful time strategically planning. But you need to make sure that you're staying close enough to your business that it informs your thinking. Otherwise, you're going to be developing a strategic plan that is not based on the reality of what is happening today. One of the things that I think is so important here about why this is important for 2021 is because the same issue as it was for the today thinker, except with a different twist. Things are changing so rapidly. You want to make sure that you have an adequate sense of your clients' pain points, maybe how your employees' expectations are changing. And of course, nothing is a sure thing anymore. All the planning that you might have done in the previous years may not even be applicable in today's world. And the key here is that you want to be able to create a high agility culture, which is I've got enough nimbleness in how our team plans that we can go whichever direction that we need to. Janet, I'll hand it over to you for mistakes number 2 and 3.
So the second mistake is this balance between being overly collaborative and individually siloed by the teams that you may have in the company. And it really doesn't matter if you are an organizational manager or leader, or maybe you're a C-suite that is on the call with us today. And, we're really facing this potential, for really pulling focus. If we become too overly collaborative, which, for some of us, our inclination is let's engage everybody, even our call center people or the people that are on the front lines at the storefront level. You have at this time, kind of looking at the virtual piece of things that are happening now with COVID, you've got too many voices and possibly differing opinions, and it would be almost really, really difficult to get to a consensus by engaging almost too many people too early on in your planning process. Also, the ability with childcare, and someone actually mentioned in the chat when we were talking about obstacles to planning that a lot of people are barely able to just hang on to function in their day-to-day job if you're pulling focus away from that. So you have to really, really be able to strike that balance, because what would happen is if with so many people involved, the accountability for who owns the plan gets very, very hazy. How this impacts 2021 is burnout and stress. So if we began a huge process to engage the whole company, and later on we will talk about like a bottoms up approach to planning, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be involved, but it has to be at that right level, because you'll have to accommodate for both a hybrid and this virtual this virtual world that we are living in, let's just say for the immediate future. And what would happen is, of course, the pace of planning is going to really, really slow you and your team down. On the contrary, so what often happens, I'll see in organizations is, oh, we don't have time. There's just people are too stressed. We're gonna just have the functional line managers are just going to build independent plans and report that out. Well, although the intentions are positive to actually build kind of a siloed plan, what almost always happens, and this is where Lisa and I come into organizations to kind of help fix interdepartmental turf wars that result. Because what happens is there's no psychological buy-in. I'm in my silo. It becomes my team, my plan. No longer, you can even witness the language changing from our team, our plan. So how this impacts planning is, you have to have this, level of constant communication and trust in your planning process. And it is a missed opportunity if you just went with a siloed approach to unify on a common goal, and to really reset the vision and the mission and all those important aspects for your company strategy. You may not even rewrite one word of those, but don't assume that people, even at the line manager level, understand or are identifying with that in this COVID world. And, obviously none of us wants to set up a competitive mindset internally. That would not be a good outcome. Then on the contrary, sometimes we'll see organizations are struggling with, do we do like a complex plan? And we get it. There are so many explorations, options, contingencies in this COVID world. The instinct for many leaders is to like really think through every single one of those. We're going to really have you resist the urge to do that. We don't necessarily think that you shouldn't bring those up, and that there should be, a master list of all those contingencies, and maybe your group plans for 3 of those, like an if then for 3 of them versus all of them, because we can't possibly do that in this time. So we don't want to get into that scenario planning overboard. And we have to remember, for those of you that maybe are feeling a little more advanced in your planning knowledge, every employee, so yes, the retail storefront individuals that are working in the stores or the call center, they need to understand this plan too. So if you go too complex, you will really miss the boat for broad understanding and psychological buy-in on what you're trying to accomplish with your plan or your company. And really important metric to remember, or thing to remember, is that your plans need to be measurable. So the more complex the plan is, the more complex the scorecard is. And what happens is companies abandon typically measurement around, maybe not even this time of year, probably around midsummer. It gets really hard to measure because they just can't keep pace with all of the pieces and the facets of the plan. And then the communication that's required when you have a complex plan to report back on how everyone is doing to keep them motivated and incentivized also becomes very, very difficult. So the contrary to the complex plan is the simple plan. And I think if there's a good takeaway, maybe there'll be 3 or 5 for you today if you're taking notes, is, simple isn't necessarily easy. So you may come up with a refined, a little bit more of a streamlined plan for 2021, or maybe it's a strategic planning year for you. The principles are the same, but just because it's an elegant or a refined way of planning doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And you really want to make sure you make that distinction. For those of you that are moving from a pretty complex plan to a little bit more of a streamlined plan for next year, you just don't want to maybe necessarily take your foot off of the gas for growth or whatever those strategic objectives you have for the organization because you're doing a simple plan. And then, of course, the flip side is not considering enough of those variables or constraints or contingencies that are going to arise. So again, the complexity of the environment is still something that we have to remember. We have to remember that our employees, even our A employees, may not be at their A game because of children being home from school or all of the variables that are happening with how people are impacted by the global pandemic. But the planning process is still a requirement, however you or your company define it. We really want you to resist the temptation to say, you know what, this is just too hard. There's too many unknown variables. We are gonna do a rerun of 2020. It would be a huge missed opportunity for you and your team to really have those discussions about, how is COVID really impacting our plan? What are the new opportunities that are arisen? How will the new normal impact our business? These are the kinds of questions that you need to make the time and set aside the time to ask. Whether you decide to go with a complex, simple, collaborative, siloed today, tomorrow, you really still need to embrace some level of a planning process in the organization. And I love this quote. I don't know, Dwight Eisenhower. I'm not a huge historian, but he says, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And really what he's talking about is the process of the planning, developing those contingencies. You may write a plan, and a lot of critics of planning say, well, gosh, we write a plan and it doesn't even matter. It's irrelevant in 3 months. Maybe it is, but the process by which you brought your team together and the buy-in and the teamwork and all of the goodness that comes out of a planning process is invaluable. So I do not disagree with Dwight Eisenhower in this context. But the process is what we really want you to focus on. Yes, the outcomes are important in the measurement, but it's also the process. And sometimes you're going to win, but most of the time, we guarantee you will learn. And I think we would all argue, for those of you that have been hit economically by COVID, where your businesses may be down, in revenue, you definitely have learned probably more than your fair share in 2020. May not have won, but we definitely have learned. So speaking of learning, I'll turn it to Elise on our principles.
I love that, Janet. I love that quote, because I agree with you. Sometimes as leaders, we think we have this plan in our minds. And I remember my team at one point said, we don't know how you think. And I'm like, yeah, that's because I'm not ready to tell you what the decision is. They were like, but we want to understand the process by how you think. And I thought, gosh, how did I miss that? Is that as leaders, we have to engage our teams so that we coach them and teach them, and also that they have a better idea of how we are thinking. So I think that's really spot on about the planning process is the real win here. So, okay, what would be some guiding principles? We promised that we would give you some real takeaways here. So how do we balance the needs of today versus tomorrow? My mistake was, I'm too extreme one way or the other. And so here's my solution for that is, as leaders, we have to live in 3 time frames all the time simultaneously. We have to learn from the past. We have to manage adequately and appropriately the needs of the present, pay enough attention to what's going on in the present, and anticipate the future. And of course, the reason we anticipate the future is because we want to think ahead so that we can take action now to be prepared for when tomorrow comes. So how do you do that exactly?
Hey, Elise, did you want me to start the poll while we're?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm going to launch a poll right now. So there it is.
All right.
Hopefully people can see it.
Okay, there's a poll. Yes, please let us know where you are in the planning process. And this is something new that we're trying to do the poll. So let's see how that goes. Setting the context is the very first thing that I wanted to share, the principle to share around how do we live in both of those, all three of those timeframes past. So the thing to do about thinking about the past in terms of planning is I'm going to look to the past to ask myself, what did we learn from? And I've got a few on the screen here. Some of the many things that you might consider reviewing. How were our results in the last 3 years? What were the impact of some of the forces? Maybe even look back to the 2008, 2009 timeframe as something sort of similar to now to say, how did we respond and react then? How did the economy shift? What were the politics and the cultural changes that happened? What did we learn from that? Mistakes we made, you always have to ask that question. And of course, lessons learned from that. And successes that we enjoyed. And what did we learn from that? So it's important to always ask and be the reflective leader to say, what did we learn from a certain time? Now, what do we need to be doing in the present? This is just doing a good assessment. And you may already have a dashboard that you use to kind of keep up with the way things are. But if not, now might be a good time to even ask a lot more questions more broadly to say, what about our products and services? What about our positioning? Are we properly prepared for how things are changing in the marketplace? Another set of questions to ask would be around growth. Being able to ask, are we seeing right now different areas of our business growing? And maybe some of those areas are no longer growing. And what do we need to do about that? And then talent, of course, this is a top of mind for every leader. Talent is starting to shift and change, but also are the skills and expertise that you need. And maybe now is the time that you need to invest in equipping your employees to be better prepared for what comes in the future. So one of the things I want to put on your mind here around the future is I want you to think about future planning for 2021, especially in this regard, as like you have a compass in your hand. It is not a precise roadmap. A compass gives you an idea of the general direction that you need to go, but it gives you all the flexibility that you need to be able to pick the right path. And sometimes you may go down a path and find that you all of a sudden have to take a detour. And that's okay, as long as you can look at the compass and see that you're still heading in the right general direction. So one of the ways you can do that is in your scenario planning. Think broadly with your team, put all the options up on the board, and then just narrow it down to maybe 3 scenarios that we want to plan for. Our business does this in scenario A, this in scenario B, this in scenario 3. And the whole point there is to give yourself some fluidity, to really be able to know that I have plenty of options as I move forward. Here's my general plan, but it's a living, breathing document. And my compass is going to guide me where we're trying to go in general. But we know that we may take many paths to get to where we want to go. Janet?
So the poll has been completed. So hopefully you'll see it all up there. But about half of you are just getting started, which is appropriate considering that it is only still early September. It looks like 2% of you are close to being finished. So gold star there. I don't know how that's happening, but I give you lots of props for that. And about 30% of you haven't started yet. And hopefully the reason why we launch polls like this is just to let you know that you're not necessarily ahead or behind. You can kind of see here, this is a casual group of peers that are obviously in business and interested in planning. So it might kind of help you see where you sit amongst this peer group. So I always like to start before you even begin the planning process. So for those of you that really haven't started or are just getting started, hopefully you have gained some real clarity around these three key planning questions. And the first one is, who is the one person, your chief implementation officer, for your plan for 2021? If it's you in a small to medium-sized company, perhaps you're the CEO, maybe you have an operations person, perhaps it is a project manager that you've entrusted the keys to the plan. But who is in charge for the entire year of not actually doing the plan, but monitoring, maintaining, making sure that the data that's in there is valid in the plan? Really, really important. And make sure that that person knows and that your team knows that that is your person. And even if it's you, you need to kind of put a claim in the ground that you are the accountable party for the plan. Now, there's a big difference between accountable and responsible. So your line managers or vice presidents, whoever that is, and depending on your org structure, are the team members that are responsible for active contributions to the process and the plan. And yes, I know that those people are very busy and very stretched, but you really can't go into 2021 without a plan. And then bringing that group together, the implementation officer, maybe you are the plan sponsor as the leader of the planning process, and then the actual team members that are going to have to step up for deliverables need to come together and assign a timeline to develop the plan. I know this seems so basic, but I'm coming into organizations and kind of helping, and I'm realizing, wait a minute, there's no one really accountable to making sure that this plan gets done or that we're measuring along the way. So that is a place to start. Now, this is a really complex model, one that I'm using with a company that I'm working with now, which is really skinned down, very, more on the complex side. I would consider this a more sophisticated or an advanced planning model. But here's a planning model that I used at my own agency for my own team, which I thought was very simple and easy to use. And it really breaks down this planning process in 3 simple phases. And reason why I'm showing you these as options is you have to come up with a planning model that works. If you remember the complex versus simple, if you go overly complex, it'll just result in frustration and exhaustion of those people. You want to be able to keep it simple enough. And so what we used to do is this would be phase 1, somewhat not subbed out, but a lot of this would be done by a marketing group. Sometimes teams and operations would be responsible for creating what we called the briefing book for the planning process, for our annual planning process. This included quantitative data in surveying our customers, our employees for things like satisfaction or net promoter scores. We would, obviously spend time as an upper management team discussing, but also would engage the employees at that level as well. And then looking at things like new competitors or market forces, obviously, the impact to COVID on our business, all of the things that Elise talked about in the past might end up in this briefing book. This is just a sample. That briefing book goes to your planning team, whoever that is in the company, and you're starting with, and I know this seems like, really, I have to tell people the vision and mission and values again? Yes, you do. You need to have this first session. It is a kickoff. This can be done a variety of different ways. Sometimes this is done with the whole company in an all hands setting. Sometimes it's done just with your strategic leaders or your planning team. Then you get into more of the implementation, which are, things like resources, what are the main key goals, and then the action planning, which is like, what's the stuff that we need to get done in order to implement our plan. So really basic, usually it's more than 3 meetings, right? But you can see here, I'm really trying to distill this down. And then finally, phase 3, and this is where I feel like a lot of people get hung up on step 1 and step 3. So Elise and I are both former communicators, and the fact that plans don't get shared with the company overall, maybe not the whole plan, maybe pieces of the plan, but there needs to be a structured communication plan in place for, okay, we've taken all these data points. What's the process for sharing that out? How will we let people know? Do we need to let outside stakeholders know? Maybe our customers should know pieces of our strategic plan, but really taking the time to think that through. Of course, the actual plan, whatever that plan is, it could be similar to the models I showed on the prior slides, or something that works for your company, and then the monitoring. And then somewhere in the midst of this, it depends on the company and your deadlines and your planning cycles, is the annual budgeting process. And I would argue, until you have some of these phases done, it would be very difficult to enter into what kind of stuff do we need to buy if you don't have the plan or the direction for how you'll go forward. And of course, I know there are tons of variables in how budgeting happens in organizations, but really it needs to come subsequent. And I think the inclination is for leaders to start with the budget and kind of like, oh yeah, now we need to do a plan for like, what are we going to do? And it should be more than just, a revenue plan per se. some questions, that you can start to stimulate, get some of that thinking. If you don't have a process that will garner like quantitative data, go with qualitative and ask your team. Maybe you're a line level manager. Hey, here are some great questions. What are your pain points, Susie Cream Cheese? How has COVID impacted you? What are you seeing as our top competitors in this past 6 months? Identify some of the key issues or the trends, best opportunities. You can really start to engage people by just asking great coaching, empowering, open-ended questions. And of course, I just have to remind you, why do strategic plans primarily fail annual business plans? It's in the monitoring. You develop this plan, you go through all this work, and then companies, when things get busy and, the shiitake mushrooms hit the fan, we have a tendency to say, well, we don't need to measure that. We're too busy. We really have to be focused. If you're committing to doing a plan, you have to commit to at least quarterly measuring and monitoring of that plan. So, why do we do that? Because it's to make sure your plan is working, so that maybe you need to make an adjustment. The destination entirely might change for many of you with COVID. This is the case. And then, of course, the proper motivation to make sure that people are remaining motivated. A couple of books that Elise and I like that include some planning methodology. If many of you have heard of the 12-week year, possibly Traction by Gino Wickman is the Entrepreneur Operating System, are all great sources for training. And of course, please don't forget to include some time for reflection upon last year. And I recommend we don't do this in a rush. You take a few hours with your team and really start to think about how the past will change your future. 1:31. We did okay.
We're gonna hold you guys just a couple more minutes. We want to tell you about something that we have as a special offer for you, and we've got a download. We're going to tell you about it in just a second. So if you can hang on with us just for a few more minutes. If you like strategic planning and what we're giving you, and you want more of this, and you feel like you or anybody on your team could use a little bit of an investment right now, we're getting ready to launch our third cohort of the Leadership Academy. For those who've been with us this calendar year, know that we have done a lot of free webinars. We decided to launch Leadership Academy back in early spring. Then we went through the summer with the second cohort and had such great response. We loved it. But we decided to offer it one more time before the end of the year. And I know it's a busy time, but maybe there's even somebody on your team. If you don't want to do this, I don't think you could take the time. You want to invest in a key leader or an up and coming leader that would like a little bit of help. It's a 6-week virtual leadership experience. You can see the topics there and see the dates. It is live instructor-led sessions. So Jan and I are on there every single time. We have breakout groups, so you get to know those that are also in the class with you, and you get to build your own network. We have frameworks, processes, we have tools, resources. We give you a lot of stuff. And it's just one of the ways that we've just have felt both very compelled this year to do as much as we possibly can to equip and empower leaders, because I think leaders need a lifeline this year more than ever before, to have the things that they need in their leadership toolkit to really be able to lead the best way they can. Things are just too uncertain right now. The game is changing so much. So how do you want to be a part of it? Well, again, these are the dates. They are just 90 minutes live every Tuesday at noon. And for those who say, well, I can't make every Tuesday at noon, or that's noon central, but if I can't make every single week, that's okay. We do replays just like we do these webinars, and you have access to all the downloads so that you can always keep up with the class as it goes along. What is your investment? Well, the normal price for this in a normal year, we would charge about $1,100 to go through this experience. But because things are just in a crazy time, we're discounting this nearly in half. As a regular price for an individual to sign up for Leadership Academy, it's just $595. But drum roll, please. As you probably have learned, when you show up to our stuff, we always try to reward you with something extra. And so Janet and I have created a special discount for you. And it is, instead of the $595, we've dropped it down to $535 for the 6-week course. Katie is going to pop into the chat box a link there that you can go to. We have a special landing page. Now, this landing page is special for this discount. We won't be making this particular page available publicly, but this is the Lead Now special discount page where you can register yourself. And something else we found in cohorts 1 and 2 that was actually really popular was we threw in an option for a VIP package, which includes 2 one-to-one executive coaching sessions with either Janet or myself. And honestly, we just take the list and we divide it in half, and she takes half the group and I take the other half. It's a little bit more, but this is a highly discounted rate of what it would cost to engage either one of us to coach. Plus, we decided that with this VIP package, we're also going to do a bonus session on navigating difficult conversations. So you get a couple of extras if you decide you want the VIP package. So I hope you might be interested. And again, if not specifically just for you, maybe a colleague, maybe a leader that you've been needing to invest in, maybe now is the time to equip them to be able to step up and lead more effectively for you in 2021. And you see here, if you want to take a screenshot, you can, of that very onerous URL. But Katie is...
Think bigger, lead better too will work as well.
Yeah. Think Bigger, Lead Better is for our regular price. This is for our discounted price. So I want to make sure you get to the right landing page. This is the discounted price. And Katie has linked there in the chat box. But if you're watching the replay on this and you can't see the chat box, just take a screenshot of this and you can type it in. It's a landing page and it's leadership-academy-lead-now /. And that will get you right to the registration. And you could always reach out to either Janet or me if you have any questions about how to register and how to participate in the Academy. We'd love to have you. This has been, I don't know about you, Janet, but it's been one of the highlights of my year this year, is to be in community with so many bright, talented leaders from literally all over the world. We've had people from Europe, India, all over the US. Just, it's been really enriching to have that kind of thought, those minds coming together to really share and help one another in addition to the instruction that we provide.
Great camaraderie and a nice peer group for you as well. You never know who you'll meet when you're doing a leadership academy like that. That's live, synchronous, training.
Yeah. Very, very true. If you've got any questions, pop in the chat box, you can. I'm going to tell you about the download right now. And again, we always try to promise you, if it's 30 minutes, we went just a hair over this time. But Janet and I said, we're going to stay on until the top of the hour. As we've done before, for those who want to stay on, want to chat, want to ask questions, want to talk more about strategic planning, want to talk more about Leadership Academy, we're just going to stay on until the top of the hour. If you need to jump, I know that's okay. So let me tell you just a little bit about it's not showing up. My slide isn't showing up. I don't know why. Let me tell you what we're going to send you. That'll be the simplest thing. We're going to send you a strategic planning guide that it's free to you, but just by being a part of all this, we're going to send it to you. It has over 30 questions in 4 different areas of how you can assess your business today. So I posted a note in the chat box after I spoke that the questions you saw on my slides are in there, plus a whole lot more that might just kind of get your brain thinking about how do I assess my business today and how do I know what I need to change in my planning for 2021. So that is coming to you along with the replay link here for the webinar. In case you missed it today or in case you want to rewatch it, we'd love for you to do that always. Janet, what am I forgetting?
I think you've got it. Just please watch for the email, and there'll also be a replay in there as well for those that had to jump early or whatever. You'll get the full boat in the email.
Yeah. So we will stay on. If anybody has any questions. Now, I did see some questions that were posted a little bit earlier. Let me go through. So here's one. Sabrina asks, what if you are the person that is being drawn into many collaborative areas? So Janet, this was back when you were talking about collaborative versus siloed. I think this is a big problem for a lot of people is they're being pulled in too many directions.
Yeah. And I think it's really, my gosh, boundary setting during this time of COVID is so critical. And it's not that we're not all busy, because we are. Everybody's busy and everyone probably is feeling pulled. But I really feel like, prioritization and boundary setting is critical. So if your organization culturally is kind of wired to live in that hair on fire, urgent, important, matrix, that may or may not be the organization for you, or really looking at what are the underlying causes of why are we always like this? Is it at the leader level? I call it on my blog. I call it like being a fire starter. Do you have one of those leaders who like comes in the room, says, "Okay, this is what we're doing, everybody," and then they leave, and everyone's looking at each other, going, "What are we supposed to do?" And so there's a ton of variables on that, but I would really, start with some basic boundary setting and really open communication for how many different areas you may be being pulled into. I'm coaching someone right now that's working on 8 task force groups. 8.
Yikes.
It's not possible to do that. And oh, by the way, a whole day job, right? So it's like we have to really prioritize, figure out where that person will make a significant impact. It's impossible. It's too diffuse across 8 different groups.
Mm-hmm. Janet, I do have a question for you. I've sort of wondered your philosophy on this. Is it better to do planning like at a retreat where you take a whole day with the team, or is it better to do it in pieces? Like what do you think works best, especially I guess at a time like this?
Well, I do think that companies don't typically make enough time for planning. They'll tack planning on at the end of the Thursday meeting, the Thursday all hands meeting at 1:00, and they'll be like, "Oh, we're gonna take 15 minutes for planning." That's definitely not the right way to do it. But probably in a virtual environment, the luxury of doing these day-long or sometimes 2-day-long retreats is probably not going to happen. So that's why it's good that some of you have started, but by getting that timeline, because you're going to have to accommodate that the planning process is just going to take a little longer when you're virtual. And what I'm seeing companies do really successfully is the task group, the planning team is meeting weekly, and maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 45 minutes, or by every other week for a 90-minute slot. And they're really just focused on the planning pieces. Like, okay, what is it that we are, what are we doing? So you need to get that level set, because I completely agree, though. That's a luxury that I just think putting people through an hour-long or day-long virtual planning seminar is not going to work.
Yeah, that's a little tough. I'm going to we've got another poll for those of you who are still here in the second half hour. I'm going to start that poll, which we thought this would be kind of a fun question to ask, which is, do you feel more energized, less energized, or completely freaked out? So just after spending a couple of minutes with us today, how are you feeling? Oh, good. Lots of more energized. Oh, some completely freaked out. We thought there might be a few folks who would answer that. I know planning can feel overwhelming, but I will tell you one thing to remember. This is a neuroscience tip, is that just taking the first step on anything makes it seem a little bit easier. If you can just begin the process, as Janet said, maybe you don't do it like all in one big day, but maybe you kind of space it out and just say, we're going to start the process, and our goal is to complete it by, give yourself maybe a 60-day window or something to get it done by. But just starting the process, it makes it feel a little bit easier. We always overestimate how hard and difficult something will be, and we always underestimate our ability to deal with whatever does come our way. You can do more than you think you can. The key is to prioritize it and just begin the process, because chances are then you'll be able to take it through to the finish line. So, okay, good results. 80% or more energized, 3 less energized, 3% completely freaked out, 16%. Okay, I'd say that's pretty good. Yeah, I'll take those results.
It validates our introductory slide of we hope to kind of jumpstart your planning. Sometimes it just takes a nudge, and so consider this. Elise and I are nudging you to kind of get started. Identify that the single person who's going to be in charge of your planning process, and then build that team. And even if you just started there for this week, that would be a win.
Mm-hmm. So we've got another question, which is, how long does the replay link stay active and available? Sabrina, that's a great question. I have no idea. Katie is our digital marketing strategist that backs us up. If you're still listening and can respond into the chat box for those who want to know, I think we usually keep it fairly light. Now, we don't share it except with you. So we don't share it just with the group who registers. We do that on purpose because we're trying to reward you all for giving us the gift of your time. We want to make sure you have access, gated access to things that we do just for you. So Katie can probably weigh in there and tell us. And if not, Sabrina, we'll make that available. We'll make sure to communicate that when we send it out. So what other questions do you guys have for us? Anything strategic planning? Anything leadership? We can even open it up, Janet. How about anything leadership? Anything you're struggling with right now? Maybe what are you anxious about that's leading up until the close of the year? I have a lot of clients I've been working with this week who've said, is it going to be, are we going back into lockdown, or is it going to actually start loosening up a bit now that we sort of feel like we have vaccines on the horizon, like starting to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel? And I think Janet and I feel like that it's going to be a bit of a sprint, because people will start to realize, oh my goodness, I only have a couple months left to where the turn of the year begins. And for those of us in the U.S., we'll, be past an election at that point. Don't know what the outcome will be yet, of course, but we'll be entering a new phase, another 4 years of thinking through our relationships with our governments and how we succeed in our businesses in that type of environment.
So we have a question. How do you maintain motivation and momentum to keep working your plan, like when it gets tiring or when you need to pivot?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that, Elise?
Motivation, momentum, keep working your plan.
So it's summer. So maybe for the people who have written a plan and then they're like, oh man, that plan, it's not very good. We don't really need to, everything's changed, or, people just kind of lose that momentum.
Yeah. So I got a little neuroscience tip for you. For those of you who know me, know that I'm always looking to bring in those neuroscience things. Our brains are much more inclined to latch onto an idea if we see it in our own mind. So part of the visioning and planning process is setting a clear idea of what is it we are trying to accomplish. Like when we get there, what will it be like? And that helps ingrain in your team's head the benefits that they will enjoy when they reach the goal. So if you've set the goal to say, we want to hit a certain number, for example, or we want to launch a new service by the end of 2021, then fast forward, they're thinking to say, well, what will that be like when we've accomplished the goal? And get them to go, oh, it's going to be great because we're going to have more revenue. We'll be able to hire more. We'll have new and different types of clients, whatever it may be. But the idea is to get them to sort of see it in their minds now. And that vision, once they have it in their head, will help them go forward through all the slogging it's going to take to actually accomplish the goal. If you keep saying, remember, when we get there, it's going to be like this. And that is usually what motivates us to keep going when we feel like the goal is still so far away.
Yeah, it's like that psychological buy-in. And,
yes.
And, when it's just really... I don't want to make this, I'm not trying to oversimplify, but I am a mom. And so sometimes I make it about like, if these were my children, how would I get them, to invest in the process, right? It is like, sometimes some days harder than others, particularly when people are feeling maybe a little bit burdened with personal challenges right now, like children working from home. Definitely. There's an interesting question here about how can leaders ask for constructive feedback to help inform how we're leading now and if it needs to change.
Great question.
So that's Jessica. So, well, first off, there are a lot of like quantitative assessments that can be done. Like there's a 360. Some are, much less expensive than others. You can just like a car, you could get a Chevy or you could, do an expensive import. But that would be a great place to start as a leader, but also just asking the question in your one-on-ones, hey, what do you think the mission is for the company? And just like, so it's up here for you, but by asking others, like, where do you think we're taking this company in the next year? You may be surprised. And some of them are really divergent from what you have up here. And that's because they've been receiving signals, particularly in lack of like communication. If you yourself as the leader are exhausted, feeling a little burned out, one of the first things to usually slip is communication. Because you just are not feeling up to it oftentimes. And so I think that is a really good place to start is to ask what other people's understanding is of what your vision or your mission is, your plan for the company.
Mhm. Catherine has a good question that kind of builds right on that. Is it better to plan to the president's expectations, which is her, to whoever is in charge? Is it better to plan to the leader's expectations or to what the team believes that they can accomplish?
It has to be both.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that teams right now are practicing boundary setting and probably saying, my gosh, there's no way we could grow 10% in 2021 or 20% in 2021. So you as the leader really have to balance that with what you believe is possible and what they think is possible. And, but you won't know until you ask and put the goal out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you may think that that is what they think, but really verify that that is indeed what they are thinking.
Yeah. I've had the experience where you could see some of your teams would kind of sandbag a little bit, like, well, we think we could do this next year. And I'm like, I know you could do more than that. But so there's a difference between giving somebody a stretch goal that is unrealistic, because what that does is it makes you give up, because you say, well, I can't go from this to this. That's just not even achievable. And so you kind of let go of the rope. The team say, okay, right. And we had that happen to us on occasion where people would say, you need to be growing way beyond what you thought was reasonable. And we think, well, that's so difficult. We don't think we can do it. So you lose a little bit of morale. But you as the leader, because you look broadly across the enterprise, you may be seeing some opportunities that they don't see because they're running a certain team. So that's where you can begin to challenge a little bit. So what we used to do at Mitchell is we would get the first draft of each team's idea of what they could do next year. And we would go through and kind of edit it and give them some suggestions. And we would challenge them to go back and see what else they thought they could do. And that was usually when they brought their A game the next time. And sometimes it was, these two teams need to be cross-selling. They're both serving the same client, but they're not completely selling each other's services more like they could. So we could see this exponential opportunity that maybe the team leaders weren't seeing. So that's why I think it's really good to have an informed process that comes from the bottom up, but you help guide and shape what their vision could be, and then eventually all to agree. So the best goals from neuroscience, I'll tell you, the best goals are challenging but achievable. They're challenging, so they're not a slam dunk. It makes you stretch and grow. And achievable, so it's not that it's too far to accomplish, but it is realistic that you could accomplish if you gave the right effort.
Yeah. And I think just culturally making it okay to plan and not live in that firefighting mode. That is a big challenge, because when there's a crisis du jour that has fallen on your plate, it's very easy, right, to say, oh, forget the plan. We got to, everybody go over this way. We have to fix this. And so there are times when, and maybe that means that you're covering for each other. Like, hey, this Thursday, I have to spend a half hour working on my group plan. It's not done. If there's a client issue, what do you think you cover for me? Like, sometimes by setting that up, and you as the leader, like putting that time on your calendar, you're really leading by example. Okay, guys, I have to do some heads down planning this day. If unless this or this happens, I'm going to really try to be in a planning mode. I think people will be like, wait, what is she doing? Is she really working? But then you have to lead by example, show that work. Here's what I worked on, or, whatever that looks like. But you're trying to move a culture to get out of that hot box and into, a little bit more of a, I don't know, an easier planning environment.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll say too, it's very common that leaders say, I don't have the time to plan because I am having to be a today thinker. I'm running around putting out all the fires. I'm trying to keep the business afloat right now. That's a lot of what people are doing. And certainly you have to do that. But I tell my clients, you have more time than you think you do. You need to sit down and be realistic about how you're spending your time, because there's sometimes that we run to a fire to put it out because it makes us feel good. Oh, I'm so needed. I'm the firefighter. I'm the one riding in on the white horse. Doesn't that make me so valuable? We get a lot of sort of reward, sense of satisfaction out of solving problems. But be honest with yourself and ask, is that something that somebody on my team probably could have responded to if I had properly equipped and coached them to be able to put out their own fires? And that would allow me to have more uninterrupted strategic thinking time. And that's usually the answer, is that you've allowed your schedule to take over your life and let everybody else dump stuff on it. But in fact, you need to be more proactive to plan your calendar. And so one of the things I always say is go in and find 2 times each week where you can block uninterrupted planning time for you to sit and think. And in this case, you could think about the strategic plan for 2021, because that's pressing on you now. But do that as a good discipline all the time. I have early morning hours that are set aside for me, and I really try to keep away from that sort of like 7 to 10 a.m. unless I have to. But I use it as quiet time, as downtime to really go deep on creating content, preparing for something I'm doing, or to help think for my clients. So you need that quiet, deep planning time. It's the only way you get in flow, and you have a chance for your prefrontal cortex to really work on important things like strategic planning.
Yeah. And in this environment that we're in, it's very easy for not just you, but every employee that is working remotely to sit down in front of their computer, open their email, and then suddenly what is in that email, and usually it's in the order that it came in, is the most important thing.
Yeah, and that's not at all what's most important.
No sense, but yet that is what is happening in this environment. And so you have to really break that, I don't know, that way of thinking. And also, if you think about Slack or Zoom chat or Teams, whatever you're using, well, I don't know, where's Elise? Why isn't she replying? Elise, I Zoom chatted you 5 minutes ago. She must not be working. It's like we really are having to kind of prove, like, I think there's a lot of employees trying to prove their value, prove their worth. You have to really, as the leader, let that go for them. Don't feed that beast as much as you can, because that just creates also just burnout and exhaustion. And so the only way it's going to change, if you're waiting for something to change, it's not going to happen. Like, COVID is here for the next at least 6 months, probably, even with the vaccine. So you've got to start setting the pace and setting the tone for that and making it okay.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, for those of you who were with us earlier this summer, we did the burnout webinar, which is kind of the flip side, which is everybody's working so much and so long and they don't know how to turn it off, and they're absolutely just giving out. And so I've actually been coaching a lot of my clients over the last couple of months on how you can create a break for people and how you can sort of force them to take a bit of time off and hand the baton off to each other. Because especially now, if we go through the end of the year at a sprint, real running pace here to get to the end of the year, your people need to be very focused through these last couple of months. They need a bit of time. So maybe this month is a good month to say, everybody just take a day and just unplug, rest, read, go to the park, go for a run, whatever it is that you want to do that's socially distanced and safe, but just to get away from the computer so you don't feel this constant on responsiveness that, I'm proving myself because I'm responding. Instead, I need to take care of me, or I'm not going to be able to make it to the end here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
think our chat slowed down a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. You see, Janet, this group has it. They got it. Yeah. They're good. Awesome. They're good. We love you guys joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We hope we see you in Leadership Academy. I can't tell you how much fun it is. It's so rewarding and so energizing, and it's really amazing. So if you can join us, or if you have somebody on your team, we would love to have them. So, Catherine's asking, I got to answer this one last question, because I know, how much riding have you gotten in the last year? So I just got back from a 2-week motorcycle trip, which this was, for me, was the unplug. Like Janet and others have said, Elise, you haven't taken any time off since lockdown kind of thing, which I had a little bit over July 4th holiday, but not really. So my husband and I decided, and we went on a 2-week ride out west in the beautiful, beautiful west of the United States. And we rode back roads almost exclusively. And of course, we were a long way away from other people, so we felt safe doing it. But we saw some of the most amazing little towns and national forests and mountains and streams. And it was just absolutely such a gift. And I know not everybody could take time off like that. It wasn't an expensive trip, but it was because we were just on a motorcycle, stayed in Best Western or whatever we could get our hands on. But it was the gift was the time away. And I know that's very special. So we were very grateful. So I have gotten a lot of riding done.
Even coaches need coaches, Elise.
Even coaches need coaches. We need to unplug just a little bit, or we'll make it to the end. So
that's right, guys.
All right, everybody. We'll let you go. Get back to your day.
Thank you so much.
You. Take
God
care.
Bless. Bye,
Bye-bye.